Hi, it's Pam, and today I'm talking about my most nostalgic games. So there's been a tag going around YouTube recently where people are talking about their 5 most nostalgic games. I was tagged by Crosschop to do this. If you haven't checked out his channel, I suggest you do. His videos are very well made and I quite enjoy them. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below. So I've been trying to think of what my most nostalgic games are. I don't have a particularly good memory, so whereas some people, remember things like, oh, I got this for Christmas when I was 9 from my parents or whatever, I generally don't remember those kind of things. I don't remember how old I was when I played a game or, what year it was. The nostalgia for me comes in with just playing the game again or playing something or seeing something that reminds me of the game, and it's like a big dopamine hit or like a big warm hug that just makes me feel good. So I've been thinking about my top 5, and the first one I'm going to say is Startropics. And this is actually one where I do remember when I got it. I got it as a first communion present from my grandmother. I did not make my first communion in first grade with the rest of my class because I never went to church, but I finally made it in like grade 3 because my grandma snuck me into her church to do it. So after I got that, she got me Startropics as a gift. And it's one of the games that I really love. I think it was the second retro review I ever did when I started my channel. It's kind of like one of those comfort food games, especially the first half of it, where as soon as it boots up and I hear the music, it just feels good, and it sort of takes me back to when I was a kid with few worries and a lot of time to play video games. The music is great. It's great to play the first few levels where I know every little secret, I know what every villager is going to talk to me about and what they're going to say to me. So even though now I do have some complaints about the game when I play it, especially the later levels, it's still one of those games that just brings back a lot of good memories because I spent so much time as a kid playing it. And then of course there's the dipping the paper in water, which is pretty difficult to forget. For my next most nostalgic game, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say 2 games, so they're both from the same series. I remember once going over to my aunt's house with my dad, and she knew that I liked video games, and she had a computer. And so she turned on a video game for me while her and my dad went to drink or whatever they do. And the game was Leisure Suit Larry 3. And I remember as soon as I started playing the game, you start off on this overlook, sort of looking over the city, and there's these binoculars. And so you go and you look in the binoculars a couple times. And one of the times you do it, you look into someone's apartment window, and there's a woman in there, and she's naked. You can see her boobs. And I remember I wasn't very old. I was 8 or 9 years old at this point, so I was just like, oh my god, this game has boobs, and my mind was blown. Then my aunt came and saw, and she's like, oh, maybe this isn't appropriate for a child. So she turned it off and then put on Leisure Suit Larry 1, which isn't any more appropriate, but at least there's no immediate nudity in that game. So that's a series that I sort of have a soft spot for, even though it's, rather juvenile. I've played all the games, at least all of the sort of main series of games up until Leisure Suit Larry 7. I've played both the remakes of 1. Why they needed 2 remakes of Leisure Suit Larry 1 is a good question. They definitely didn't need a second remake. But yeah, that's another game I have good memories of. I really like at the beginning of the game to test your age. They asked you a bunch of trivia questions, and even now when I'm definitely old enough to play the game, the trivia questions are hard because they're from the 80s and I don't know all the answers from then, but luckily there's the internet now. So next is the game that inspired my love of FMV games, and it's Under a Killing Moon, which is part of the Tex Murphy series of games, which there are 4 of now because they just put out a 4th one after a very successful Kickstarter a couple years ago. This one I remember when I first saw it, it was in a Radio Shack in, the big box, And I remember seeing that there was real actors in it, and I was just amazed at this. And it looked like a detective-style game, and I probably didn't recognize any of the actors at this point, but it's got like Margot Kidder and Russell Means and Brian Jones. So, you know, some semi-famous people. But this is another one where the music just takes me back, partially just because, you know, it evokes those memories, and partially because the music is just so good. The opening of that game is just one of the most memorable for me. It starts with like an old style newsreel, and then you've got James Earl Jones narrating the intro, and he's reading an Edgar Allan Poe quote. So it's just pretty amazing, and it's another one of those games that I just played so much that I basically have all the puzzle solutions and everything memorized in that. Though the second game, Pandora Directive, is generally thought of as superior, Under a Killing Moon is the one that really got me into that series, and it was one of my favorite games for the longest time, and I still go back and play it every once in a while. So my next most nostalgic game is Quest for Glory 4. I first played this while I was in elementary school. It was later in elementary school, like grade 7 or 8, and my best friend at the time brought over the disc for me to play, and I remember it was just like a blank disc, like it was a pirated version of the game, so it was my very first experience with pirating content. I have since paid for the game, both like a boxed version and a digital version, so I've made up for it, I think. But I always really liked RPGs, and this one just looked and sounded so much better than anything that I had played before. It still had that pixel style, but everything was very vibrant and crisp, and all of the characters in the game were had voice acting, which was really good, and the voice acting was strong. It has some famous people like Jennifer Hale in it, who I didn't know who she was at the time. But it was just a really fun RPG, and it sort of introduced, at least for those kind of point-and-click RPGs, the idea of being able to pick your class. So whether you played as a fighter or a mage or a rogue, you did things a little differently, and the story went a little differently for you. And after I played Quest for Glory 4, I went back and I played 1 through 3, and then 5 eventually. So this became one of my favorite stories, and it's another one of those games where as soon as I put it on, although I do sometimes still get stuck in this because I don't have at least the order to do things memorized, but as soon as I put it on, I just feel good, and it sort of takes me back to that time where I played that game a lot. And my last most nostalgic game is Lands of Lore: The Throne of Chaos, which is a dungeon crawling game. And anytime, even now, I think of a dungeon crawler, this is what I think of. It's just sort of like grid-based movement, sort of you can move in one of 4 different directions. Every time I turn on something different, like a Diablo or whatever, I'm like, I wish this was more like Lands of Lore. So you start off and you can pick between either 3 or 4 characters. You've got like the super brutish strong guy, you've got a mage, you've got like the balanced guy, and then there's an agility like cat person, and you have to go find the cure for the king who's been poisoned, and the king is voiced by Patrick Stewart. It's just a really fun game. It's just what it says. It's just dungeon crawling. Like you go on a big huge map and you explore and you find loot and you deal with inventory and you fight monsters, and this again is just, I have such good memories of this game. Every time a game came out after that billed itself as a dungeon crawler, I was like, oh, I hope it's like Lands of Lore, but it never was. And even the second Lands of Lore was nothing like the first Lands of Lore and was completely disappointing. I was nicely surprised, though, when a game called Legend of Grimrock came out a few years ago, because that is as close to the first Lands of Lore as I've ever come. That was a really good game. If you have played Lands of Lore and are looking for something similar, I would totally recommend that one. But yeah, that was a good one, and it also sort of reminded me a bit, it also gave me nostalgia a little bit for another game, which was Wizardry 5, which I used to play when I was in, I don't know, grade 4 or 5 at a friend's house, and we'd go and you'd like map out the dungeons on graph paper, and this Lands of Lore had like a dynamic map, so besides one level you didn't have to actually graph anything out, but it was just a really super fun game, and I would love to play more like it. And I'm just going to mention one honorable mention here, and that is Rbi Baseball, which I had on NES, although I had the Tengen cart rather than the licensed cart. And I didn't even realize how nostalgic this game made me until Rbi Baseball came out again, like a remake on Xbox and things. And while I don't play it, my boyfriend plays it, and it uses the exact same sound effects. So every time I hear the baseball get hit and goes like, woo! And I was just like, oh god, that brings me back to when I was like 8 years old and playing Rbi Baseball, and back when I would get excited about seeing a Blue Jays name in a video game because the Blue Jays were actually good. So that is my 5, I guess 6, most nostalgic games. I would love to know what yours are and what you think of my picks. I also need to tag someone, and I'm going to tag Daria of Daria Plays RPGs. If you haven't checked out her videos, you definitely should. They're really good, they're very well edited, and as her channel name suggests, she mostly does RPGs, a lot of focus on 16-bit JRPGs. So yeah, check her out. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. For my next most nostalgic game is